Today's story comes from before time, from the long, long ago, before the world was a red dust ball, before there were triffids banging at the vault door trying to get at us. This story comes from a time when plants grew and didn't try to eat us, when occasionally they would grow fruit that we could eat. This story comes from a time when plants would grow into groups called jungles. In those jungles it would rain often, and you would find all kinds of wonderful plants, fruit, vegetation. And inside those jungles you would also find animals. Animals like birds of paradise, so beautiful in their plumage. Animals like monkeys that would chatter as they zoomed through the canopy. Animals like the tiger. In the parts of the world where you would find jungles and tigers, there is tell of a creature that could shape change. It could change its form from tiger to human and back again at will. This is our telling of how such a creature might come to be. Our story starts in a village. A small village on the outskirts of a jungle. Long ago, the elders of this village laid down some rules. They knew that deep inside the jungle there lived tigers. Our tigers didn't care much for villages. They forged their own territories and would defend them ferociously. Any creature might defend their home ferociously if they thought it were invaded. So the elders decided to leave the jungle to the tigers. They would just have the outskirts. There was still plenty of fruit and things for them to forage there, and the river that came out of the jungle was full of fish. There would be plenty for everyone to eat, and there would be no need to come to loggerheads with the tiger at all. The time our story starts, there is a woman called Zara. She is one of the gatherers of this village. Every day she would put on a gathering bag that she'd had since she was a child. She would take her foraging knife, which was sharp to the touch, and she would head to the outskirts of the jungle. She would tread those well-trod paths, picking fruit from the trees, cutting vegetation down from the root, sometimes digging up the root so they may have a hearty stew that evening. But Zara was a curious person. She thought that inside the jungle there might be things even more delicious. Fruits, plants that she'd never seen before, something really scrumptious to eat. And so one day, she decided to set off on her own path. Just as ever, she picked up her foraging bag. She gathered her knife and put it safely in her belt, and she set out to the outskirts of the jungle. She trod that well-trod path, but she noticed that the trees about were picked clean of fruit. In fact, the only fruit that could be picked was at the very, very tops, but they didn't seem ripe enough yet. So she veered off the path and headed deeper into the jungle. She had to push through the undergrowth that wanted to slash at her ankles. She had to push past giant leaves bigger than any she'd seen before. She had to push those back and battle through. Lianas hung from the highest tree all the way down till they touched the floor. She carried on through though, occasionally having to use her knife to cut through some of the thicker vegetation. In some places, the trees grew so close she couldn't squeeze through. In some places, she saw wondrous things. Birds of paradise singing so beautifully. They were much prettier than the birds she got back in her village, the bulbuls and the fodies, the little sparrows that always tried to steal their breakfast. Sometimes she'd go into a clearing, and as she looked up, she would see the faces of monkeys staring back at her. Silently. It was a little unsettling, and so she left as quickly as she came. There were all sorts of wondrous things in there. She found all sorts of wondrous fruits that looked tough and knobbly on the outside, but when she cracked them open, it was sweet like custard on the inside. Other fruits that looked like oranges, something she had plenty of, but these were green. Even so, she sliced it open, and inside it tasted like nothing she had ever tasted before. She was excited to take all of this back to her village, but still she carried on deeper into the jungle. As she gathered and searched, she suddenly stopped. On the edge of her hearing there was a sound. A twig snapping. There was something watching her. Something in the undergrowth that did not want to be seen. Terrified, she looked about herself. What was it? What was it? And there, she saw the eyes of a creature looking back at her. Slowly, it began to prowl out of the undergrowth. A tiger, the king of the jungle. It had found her, and it was coming towards her.
I am Tiger. I belong to the jungle, and the jungle belongs to me. I am striped like the grass. I am the grass, and the grass is me, is Tiger. I protect what is mine. I am made for the jungle. The deer and the boar, they are also made for the jungle. But it is mine to defend, it is mine to protect. Only I, Tiger, can prowl its depths as I do. The woman, she came to the jungle. She came as she was not meant to do. I must defend, I must protect what is mine. I must do as I am intended to do. I must pounce!
At once the tiger pounced. The tiger was slashing with its claws, biting with its teeth, using those powerful limbs. Zara fought with her knife and her wits. The tiger was doing what it must. The tiger was doing what it needed to do to defend its home. The fight was ferocious. The fight took all of the energy of both sides. But eventually, Zara was the one that won out and killed the tiger dead. All at once, a wave of guilt crashed over Zara. How could she do that? How could she have killed such a beautiful creature? She ran. She ran as fast as her legs could carry her. She ran away from what she'd done. She ran away trying to leave it behind her. She ran deeper and deeper into the jungle. She ran trying not to trip over roots, dodging branches, being whipped by lianas as she hurried by. She ran until her legs could carry her no further. She sat on a tree and cried. She was the one that was in the wrong. She was the one that had violated the rule of the village. She was the one that had killed the tiger. As she sat there mournfully, she heard a sound. Something close by. A soft mewling. Intrigued and curious again, she got up and followed that sound. It didn't take her long to find a den. And inside that den were 3 small tiger cubs. She looked at them and felt guilty all over again. Those small, tiny, frail things. Those small tiger cubs, eyes barely open, paws far too big for their body. They were padding around that den looking for a tiger that wouldn't come back. They wouldn't last long if there was no one there to look after them. They wouldn't last long if no one was there to care for them, to protect them. And Zara knew what she had to do. Carefully, she gathered those 3 tiger cubs up, put them in her gathering pouch, and headed back home. Once she got back to her house, she made sure that the tiger cubs were comfortable. She put them in front of the fire to keep them warm. She went and got goat's milk to feed them. She stayed up all night to make sure that they were comfortable, that they were fed, and they were cared for. Zara noticed something as the years passed and the tiger cubs grew. Tiger cubs reach adulthood after 2 years. But 2 years passed and the tiger cubs barely seemed to have grown. In fact, as time passed, it seemed that the tiger cubs were growing at the same rate as human children. The tigers, it seemed, were picking up human traits. The tigers might have been born wild animals. They were born tigers, but they were growing up and learning how to be a human. As time passed, the tigers would walk through the village and the people would see them as other humans. But as soon as they reached the edge of the jungle, they were off as tigers in their tiger form. There are stories like this in all the lands where you find tigers. In East Asia, through China, Bhutan, Nepal, all the way to India, there are stories of creatures that can shape change at will, that are both tiger and human. So remember, the next time you are in the wasteland out on your own, if you meet a stranger, just think, it may well be a tiger in disguise.